My name's Pernilla Rudlin, Managing Director of Rudlin Consulting, Europe, Middle East and Africa representative of Japan Intercultural Consulting. Welcome to Japanese Business Mysteries Explained in 5 minutes, Part 2, Falling Asleep in Meetings. I've been asked many times by people over the years, why do Japanese people fall asleep in meetings? I've even used it as a hook in our leaflets that advertise our open seminars. What they mean by this question, of course, is partly, is it me? Am I being boring? Or if they've seen it happen several times, they begin to wonder, is it actually okay to do it in Japan then? So here are 3 explanations about why people fall asleep in meetings in Japan and what to do about it. The first explanation is that they're not actually asleep. Quite a lot of Japanese people close their eyes when they're concentrating. I think it's because they're trying to visualize what you're talking about. It's quite important in Japan to see things for yourself. So they are closing their eyes to block out, as it were, the white noise, the distractions of you waving your hands around or making funny faces, and trying to see in their own minds what it is you're trying to say. A second explanation is that actually they are asleep. You have to bear in mind that listening to a foreign language is very tiring, especially if it's been all day, all week, or if you've got jet lag. A second factor is that Japanese people generally aren't getting enough sleep in Japan. They work long hours, as is well known, so an early start, a long commute, finish late, and then go home and don't get to bed until quite late as well. In fact, I think the number one hobby in a recent survey of what people did at the weekends was catching up on sleep. And those of you who've been to Japan or have lived there, you'll have seen that Japanese people are really good at catnapping. They do it all the time, even strap hanging on trains. So a boring meeting might be one chance to catch up on a bit of sleep too. The third explanation is that it is actually the case that in Japan people do fall asleep in meetings because a lot of meetings don't really require active participation. Thanks to Nemoashi, which is a way of making decisions, Ringi and A3s, which will all be explained in the next video in this series, most discussions in Japan are done through pre-meetings or over a beer to sort out disagreements. Formal meetings are just for information transmission, rubber stamping a decision that's already been made, or if you're attending them as a representative of your team, to get a good handout and go back and report back to the team without actually contributing particularly. There is also a communication element to all of this, cultural differences in how people communicate with each other. If you look at the results of this survey, you can see that Japanese tend not to say things like no, which is quite an effective way of butting into a meeting. They expect rather more in the way of silent periods, which they don't tend to get when they're in meetings with other cultures. And the number of interruptions is indeed much lower in Japan than most other countries. And the eye contact, although they may not actually be asleep, they're also quite often not looking at people's faces as much as they might do in some other countries. But ultimately, despite all of those explanations, it is you, in the sense that you can do something about this. If you're a native English speaker, keep it short and brief. Shut up. If you can, try and put your ideas into some sort of visual format, graphics, whatever. Draw it on a whiteboard or even just on a scrap of paper. Be inclusive. Ask your Japanese colleagues for their input. Obviously, the way you do it's quite important. Don't just say, what do you think, yes or no? Try and wake them up. It's better to say things like, is there anything else that you'd like to add about this? Or is there anything else that we should be covering? Do you have any comments on this? That kind of thing. Make sure that there are good handouts. At least that gives them something to take back with them if they have fallen asleep. But it also gives them something to scribble down on and to try and read what you're saying as they follow through, which should help them to stay awake. Do your own Nemoashi, so maybe get a little bit of input from your Japanese colleagues or customers before you have the meeting to see what they think. And then afterwards, have a bit of a debrief. Ask them what they thought about the meeting, summarise some of the key points as you saw it, see what they think then. For more on Japanese business, please take a look at rudlinconsulting.com, where you'll find our blog. You can also see some of the research and the newsletter that we have. Japan Intercultural Consulting provides training, coaching, team building, post-merger integration and so on for Japanese companies and their partners. And we also have a lot of e-learning that looks at Japanese business communication, etiquette and so on Teachable.com.